Welcome to part 2 of Breaking Ground. We've got a full internal house with us at the minute. We've got the full GGC members of staff. Steve's obviously on episode 1, and we're going to bring in Caleb and Mark. I think Steve's got an armoury of questions to fire at you boys.
Yeah, so the second part of the podcast is just to elaborate a little bit more on the first podcast that we did this morning with Ilan and Dewi. Mark is based north of the border, and Caleb was very much the go-between, GGC's representative, the go-between Power Grid Civils and with Dewi. So it was under Caleb's remit, the day-to-day running of the GI programme on Burnwick Frankton. So, yeah, again, I touched on it this morning, the success of the project is something that we, as a relatively new company, should be very proud of, to conduct ground investigations of the scale that we've done. First and foremost with you, Mark, can you give us a little bit more of a technical insight into that, please?
Yeah, so it's basically, we want to get an understanding of how viable the route options are before going out to public consultations and getting our consent for these routes to minimise any route changes down the line, down the project. So by doing GI on part of the route, so a percentage of the route, it gives us an understanding of the foundation solutions we might require, what ground we're going to encounter, any other issues in terms of water, chemicals in the ground, so we do all that testing as part of the GI. By having this information early, before consent, when we go out to ITT, it allows the contractor to give us more accurate pricing as well for their jobs, because there's less unknowns.
IDT being?
Invitation to tender.
Cool.
So basically when we go out to contractors, asking them if they're wanting to do the work. And it just means that they don't add on their bit of fat to account for any uncertainties in ground conditions. So it should save us money.
What this is also doing is de-risking the project as
well.
Yeah,
exactly, yeah.
For us. We're quite constrained with this project. Will eventually end up a financial investment decision for us. So the more information we have early on, the more accurate that financial investment decision will be. And yes, it is a chunk of money to spend at this stage, pre-consent, but what the information it'll give you and the de-risking of a project, the best term I can explain it is you're spending a penny now to save a pound later. So Caleb, you're in charge from a GGC perspective, from day-to-day running of it.
He's our foot soldier.
Yeah, many miles put on the truck over the last few weeks, up and down, 2-3 times a week.
It's worth it, and they're easy miles when you got easy people to work with. You know, both sides of our side been great and supportive, especially with me coming into this role, taking up this position, and the other side have been immensely great on helping us as a new company come through, and also just with the safety aspect, the actual quality of the work, and the information they can provide, helping us through it as well.
So 12 months ago, when myself and the engineering director, Jean, first engaged with Power Grid Civils, they'd actually never heard of Green Gen Cymru. So anybody that's been in this sector a long time realises that reputation, and everybody knows everybody in this sector. So I remember in the early days when I took up my own role, I didn't take a work phone because I wanted the contacts that I was reaching out to recognise my number, good or bad. Yeah, special thanks to Power Grid Civils for putting their faith in us as a startup company, which is what we certainly were there and are now. And 12 months on, we've engaged in a full programme as we have, a successful programme.
I've been on site with you a few times, Caleb, and I've always been very close to you because you've made me stand very close to you. So from Dewi's point of view, I understand what his role is as a whole project, but from a GGC point of view, with you and your role on site, what is that? Because I see you are always taking photos, always logging stuff. What is it you're doing on site, and what's the purpose of you leaving your house to go to these sites?
Probably for more what I'm meant to, but I become a data analysis. I account for everything on site to make sure that when the invoice comes in, it's correct, even though I go over that with procurement, which Dean and Rian. And for my own clarity, basically, so that I know what's going on, not only from a safety point of view, but that everything's getting done correctly, which I liaise with Mark regular on a daily basis. We'll have a catch up, even if it's just for the crack for 10 minutes, But it's running by to get his expertise on why are they doing this, why are they doing that, and then you understand. Right, it builds a bigger picture again, and yeah, like a mini bean counter out there, getting as much information as I can, using my knowledge to understand what's going to be coming up in the future, forecasting things. But like you say, Dewi was brilliant on site, as was Thomas as well from Power Grid Civils, who was before Dewi, when Dewi was getting the introduction period into the project. The boys on site and in the office have been fantastic and helpful.
And ultimately, that filters back to doing the right thing, not only for the project from a programme perspective, and having somebody that's so invested in the project as Caelan was on a day-to-day basis. What tends to happen if you've got that level of details, you're ready for the unexpected.
I don't really know this question's for either of you two, but like in the middle of a borehole, if they're 10 metres down and they see something or feel something or they can tell something's not right, what happens and then how is that communicated to you guys? Who's first to get the comms? Like, how does it work if they've done a borehole, then they realise something's not as it should be or whatever else?
Yeah.
Go from a technical perspective first, if you want, Mark.
Yeah, so as well as appointing the drilling contractor themselves, what we also do is have a supervisory geotechnical engineer on site. So they may be independent to the contractor or they may be as part of the contracting body as well. But their expertise on site is to be able to give like immediate response in terms stop drilling, keep drilling for X amount of time, crack on. And then they would then come back to us for a bit more guidance in terms of, for example, if I think we had commissioned the boreholes to go to 15 metres depth. If our material was still very, very poor at 15 metres, they have the kind of leeway to keep on going. But they might come to us just to say, right, we're going to keep drilling to 20 metres or 25 metres until we hit competent strata.
And is 25 metres the maximum? Because I've heard that spoke by Dewi and you. Is that where you stop?
No, you can go deeper than that, to be fair, but that's just kind of where we expected. So before we go out on site, we do like a desktop study as well. So we kind of have an idea of what ground we might encounter. It's just where we're going to encounter it. So we kind of have an idea that 25 metres should be sufficient depth to get the data that we need for our foundation design.
Just on the meterage as well, when you go below or deeper than 30 metres, you fall into a different remit. So that becomes a mining type of parameter where you need licenses and etc. So going to 25 metres probably was the cut-off because of that as well. And if you go in 25 metres, you're going to have to come up with an engineering design anyway. You're not really going to just keep going down for the sake of keep going down.
So traditionally, people will know a pylon as a 400 kV because that's what they more commonly see in the public eye. They're approximately 50 metres high, ours are the 132, which are 25 metres approximately.
Yep.
So does that mean the 400 kV line, they have to bore hole much deeper than what we do? Or does it not quite work like that with the foundations?
No, potentially. Each tower has got its own bespoke design. A lot of things come into play there, for instance, whether they're on a hillside, for instance. The decision is predominantly made based on the desktop analysis of what you know before you start, really. Traditional types of foundations, you've got pile foundations, and then you've got conventional, and then pad and column foundations as well.
Don't get me wrong, though. You literally could over-engineer everything and just go in blind. You know, I've been on previous projects where they just like, what's the worst condition, expected? We'll go with that. So they end up with a DT, which a DT is a standalone tower, basically. They can take single loading on the one side, put that foundation under every single structure.
Doing it in the right order is obviously not just pivotal for us as the people who are trying to get consent and build, but also the landowners. We're doing it in the right way from their point of view because we're not just going to the worst measure that's needed to get us from A to B. We're doing it point by point, pylon by pylon.
We have not only an obligation as to a licence, we have an obligation as well to do the right thing to whoever ends up paying for this in the long run, which is all of us around this podcast table here now, the bill payers. We're all bill payers. Yeah. So as per terms of our licence obligation with the regulator, we have an obligation for these projects to be economic and efficient. So that's why we need to be confident in the design that we present before, as this goes to submission. We've done all the homework behind it, and it is the most economic, efficient, robust solution out there.
So do Ofgem have any input at this stage where it's GI? Is this purely independent, our homework, our background work?
No, this is... So usually the way to do this really as a client, which is what we are, you do a little bit of ground investigation, sporadic distances, call it 10 kilometres.
Okay.
You do a borehole, call it 5 kilometres, sorry, between 5 and 10 kilometres. You get enough information from that high-level ground investigation to formulate the invitation to tender, as Mark touched on before. And then you apply for your consent, and then you give that limited amount of information to the contractors that are all trying to win the work in order for them to satisfy themselves in terms of de-risking. What this translates to, the amount that we've done, and Kyle will come to the numbers in a minute, is roughly about 20% of the route. So that gives us a lot more information, a lot more reassurance for us, de-risks the programme, de-risks the design, and when we do come into bring the contractors on board now, that it'll give them a lot more confidence.
Yeah. Is that specifically pylons? Because we talk a lot about pylons, but obviously we are going to underground as well. So is borehole only pylons, or is that ground period, which will help for our underground knowledge as well?
Yeah, so for cables, boreholes are excessive and overkill, because we'd only be maybe digging to about 2 metres deep.
Sure.
So drilling a 15-metre hole is just kind of unnecessary. So what we tend to do for that is do a trial pit. So they're usually about 1.5 metres by half a metre by around about 3 to 3.5 metres deep. And then that should give us enough data to see what we're going to be burying the cables in. We'll do some in situ testing, we'll do some laboratory testing, looking at the thermal resistivity of the soil, and then that can also feed into the cable design, so what cables we need, core thicknesses and separation of the cables.
That's what most of our reports are based around, right? Is the feasibility and the sizes and the thermal transfer.
Absolutely. So again, it's another form of ground investigation that will support those reports. Those reports are high level at the moment, focused mainly on cost comparisons, as you know. We've released a lot of information to support the quite ancient discussion, if you like, of what's the cost difference between going underground and overhead. And as Mark says there, even though we're not going very deep along the cable corridor, some aspects of our underground that we propose to underground in, we plan to use a technique called directional drilling, HDD drilling.
Basically, if we're laying cables, so underground cables, the ideal scenario is just direct burial. But if you come across an asset or a feature which you can't feasibly open cut, you would have to do a horizontal directional drill, so HDD. And that's basically where you drill underneath that feature. So features like SSI, rivers, railway lines, major trunk roads, that there would be too much disruption or environmental issues to open cut that, you would do a horizontal directional drill. And just touching back on the GI for that, you would look at your launch and reception pits. So that's where you drill starts and ends, and then you do boreholes in those locations to understand what you're going to be drilling through. And then you pass that to a specialist consultant to do your drill paths and look at allowable settlements.
Yeah. We get so lost in the pylon conversation. Actually, there's so much. This is construction, right?
Yeah.
This is engineering. This is real trick, high-end stuff, and it's so difficult for people to actually understand what we're doing. We're not just sat around waiting for consultations to happen. We're busy, really trying to get this together, and then to portray that to the public is difficult, and we empathise with that. It just looks like we're accessing people's land and doing stuff, but it's far from that. We're so well informed and engaged in what we're doing. It's a nice opportunity like this to actually tell people and show people who are we, what we're doing, and how we're doing it to get to another point.
And we're also trying to maximise the capacity of the 132 capabilities we're allowed to go to.
Yeah.
It would be the L7C. We've seen it used in so many different things, of nowhere near the values that we're trying to get out of it and utilise it for.
I think you've touched on something there that we don't ever really talk about enough. We do internally, but we don't externally. We're innovating here.
Yeah,
like what we're doing now is we're not replicating a 400 kV national grid line. Like we are innovating. That's why this isn't easy.
You just touched on there now. So this is one of the biggest things that excited me most about getting involved in a portfolio like this. For me, I see this as a once in a career chance to build a new grid from scratch. And myself and Caleb have been involved, worked for several DNOs over the country from a contracting aspect, and you're really governed by what you do. And that's fair enough. That's their policies, that's their procedure, that's their way of doing things. And at the end of the day, you're contracting to him. You've got to toe the line. That's what they want. That's what you give them. So this is a chance to, everything that's frustrated me over the years, I can suggest alternatives to it now. So a very exciting time for us as a company now. I think what we need to do is, yes, we've got a long way to go as a company, as a team, as a business. Look at the size and scale we've grown since the three of us have been
Yeah. I walk in, because I'm not in the office much.
Yeah.
Normally I'll walk in once a month and people will look at me and say, who's this new guy? And I'm looking at them saying, who's this new guy? Because the business is not standing around. It is really investing in not only the project but the people, and, you know, a lot of the workforce is Welsh, as we touched on, and the ones that aren't is because they're experts. And I don't think there's no airs and graces with that. We are sourcing the best that we can get.
Hey, even the Welsh ones are the experts, don't worry.
Well, not all of them. But we do. I don't really like the word headhunting as such, but within the industry, we have some real leaders in this expertise, and we have the contacts to go, right, that's the issue we've got, this is the person we need, can we approach them? And like, testament to the way that the company's set up and the people who are sort of at the wheel, if you like.
Yeah, it all comes down to that. One of the main things for me is trust, for instance, you know. So going back to CIP, they've put a lot of trust in the Windward Group as a whole and as Green Gen Cymru. You know, I touched on Power Grid Civils, trusting us to come, you know, right, let's give them the time of day, let's see what this is about. And they got it immediately. Declan and Rory came over. I've known Declan and Rory for years, you know. And what you have to do is, early part of this process, you've got to sell yourself.
Yeah.
So, there's plenty of negatives going around, and that's understandable, but I think it's very important to focus on the positives as well.
Yeah, for sure.